We'll be looking at commas today as we are working our way through our 4 punctuation marks. And so I'm going to do this over the course of 2 videos because we have a number of rules we're going to work through with commas. So let's take a look at rules 1 through 4. So the comma is really our favorite coupler, and it's also a helpful sideman. What I mean by that is our comma is our go-to punctuation mark. It's the one that we always seem to refer back to because we feel confident with it, I think. And oftentimes, without thinking of why or even why we should use it, or even if we should use it, we just kind of plug it into our sentences. So it is commonly used, but it's commonly needed, but sometimes we overuse the comma. And then sometimes we underuse the comma. We're going to find some stylistic devices that we can use with the comma that we've never really considered before. And therefore, we're going to find it's sometimes just a little helpful sideman doing a little side job for us. Let's focus first on how it's our favorite coupler with rules 1 through 4. Rule number 1, for pairs of words or phrases or clauses, we don't use a comma with a conjunction. So when we have a pair of words or phrases or clauses, we don't use the comma with a conjunction. So a coordinating or a correlative conjunction is going to join a pair, but we don't need a comma. So when we mean pair, we mean pairs of verbs, pairs of subjects, direct objects, prep phrases, maybe even noun clauses. Basically, these are pairs of structures which are just going to take a conjunction, but they don't need a comma, regardless of how long they are. So when we're talking about the coordinating and the correlative conjunctions, if you need to, make sure you write those down. Those are our fanboys. Those are our correlative conjunctions, the one that come in pairs. So my example sentence reads, I Want to Hold Your Hand broke into new territory and broke records for a British band when it reached number 1 on US charts. Well, what I have are actually 2 verbs. And therefore, if I have a pair of verbs, if you diagram it in your head, you'd see there are 2 verbs joined by that conjunction and that conjunction and just joins 2 verbs. No comma is needed. It's not a compound sentence. Another example. John Lennon once quipped, I was perhaps born in Liverpool, but grew up in Hamburg. Once again, I actually have 2 verbs. If I diagram this, I would see that I have a split verb, but that's not a reason to put a comma in. It's just that the word but is kind of joining those 2 together, but there's no reason for a comma. I said it's interesting where their music style began and where it ended within their decade as a band. Well, here I have 2 clauses, and that can be a little more complex for some of us. There's a complex structure here with that noun clause where their music style began. Here's another noun clause. Really what I have are just simply 2 noun clauses, but it's not 2 complete sentences. It's just 2 noun clauses. And therefore that and joins them well, but I don't need to have anything extra. I don't need a comma at all. The second rule we have is the serial comma. So the serial comma is necessary before the conjunction in any series of 3 or more. So the serial comma or the serial, or sometimes it's referred to as the Oxford comma, sometimes it's referred to as the Harvard comma. It's basically this comma that we use when we're making a series. And in a lot of style books, or in some style books, particularly the AP style book, they will tell you that you're allowed to omit it, but we are not AP style book writers. The AP style book, referred to as the Associated Press style book, are for professional journalists. So when you're taking the SAT or you're writing for school and all other occasions, that serial comma is not an option. So anyone who's ever told you that it's an option is wrong. Example, fans love to indulge in all sorts of Beatlemania merchandise like shirts, hats, wigs, board games, bed sheets, and ice cream bars. Well, if you start thinking about it, you have all these different items in this list, 6 of them to be exact, and you put a comma between each item. So don't forget that last one. We need to pop a serial comma in there. So it goes right there between item 5 and item 6. That is the grammatical reason. It separates items 5 and 6. Another example, calling them John, Paul, George, and Ringo, we turn them into household names as if we knew them personally. So sometimes we omit the serial comma because we look at a phrase as being something that we all know, like when we say red, white, and blue. But the rule is the same. Regardless of whether it's red, white, and blue or John, Paul, George, and Ringo, it still takes a serial comma. So we should still put one there, just like you should say red, comma, white, comma, and blue. Don't fall for that trap. The serial comma is not optional. The third the third rule we have is a comma and conjunction may connect two complete sentences. This makes a basic compound sentence. Pretty easy. So we use a comma with a conjunction. It's the most common way of making a compound sentence. Remember, this works as long as there's a complete sentence both before as well as after the comma conjunction. Once again, here they are, in case you need them. Oh no, you are back. There we go. If I said, the film Let It Be inadvertently documents the band at its low point in the midst of its breakup, but it's still a valuable film about the end of the most influential musical group in rock history. Well, there are actually two sentences here. There's a first sentence and a second sentence. Because I can actually separate those as two separate sentences, and I'm going to use the word but to join them together, well, that means I need to add a comma in order for that to be a compound sentence. Two full sentences, comma conjunction. I wrote, whom we call the fifth Beatle is really a broad reference, for it truly refers to a number of musicians who contributed to the work of the Beatles. Well, I have two separate sentences. The first sentence, whom we call the fifth Beatle, is really a broad reference. And then I have a second sentence. It truly refers to a number of musicians, ... I use the conjunction for, which is not used very often, but it's still a comma conjunction because it is a compound sentence. So comma for into the second sentence. Lastly, rule number 4. A comma should always follow a conjunctive adverb, but it may not precede the conjunctive adverb. So commas are often associated with conjunctive adverbs because the comma is always going to come after them, but it shouldn't be in front of them because the conjunctive adverb is not a conjunction. It's just an adverb. So conjunctive adverbs are like transitional words. See how I did that right there? See how I said however, comma? However is not a conjunction. It's a conjunctive adverb. So I always put a comma after it, but I shouldn't have a comma in front of it. So don't fall for that trap of thinking it's like a compound sentence, because it isn't. And this is probably the most common question they'll give you on the SAT, seeing if you realize that these are not conjunctions. So here's a nice little list for us. Words like therefore and hence and thus, all great words which have commas after them, but they're not going to have commas in front of them because they're not conjunctions and they're not going to make a compound sentence. Let me show you what I mean. I said the Beatles were legally bound to perform a live concert as part of the Get Back album. Therefore, they performed on the rooftop of Abbey Road Studios on a chilly January lunch hour. It's great. You have two separate sentences, but you're trying to join them with the word therefore. And therefore is not a conjunction. And therefore, I can't use the word therefore with a comma to join them together. So I could change it to the word so. That's a comma conjunction pairing that would always make sense. But if you really like the word therefore, you're like, I want the word therefore, I don't want the word so. Fine, you can use the word therefore, but you're going to have to change it to an old school semicolon and say semicolon therefore, comma. Always a comma after your transitional word. Use a semicolon in front of it. Another example. The street signs for Penny Lane in Liverpool have become targets for thieves and mega fans. Consequently, the city permanently painted them on walls. I guess it's one way of getting people from not stealing them. Well, here I use the word consequently to join the two sentences together. Except consequently isn't a conjunction. So I need to fix that. I could maybe add a conjunction to it. If you really like the word consequently, leave it. But simply add a conjunction. So I could say, and consequently, the city permanently painted them on walls. That would be fine. Because the word and is now joining the two sentences together. Consequently is just a nice little transition. And if I'm still going to use the word consequently, I better put a comma after it because it's a conjunctive adverb. Okay. We're going to come back to our second half of our video and take a look at the more obscure ways of using the comma.